Happy holidays from all of us here at Wealthion to all of you. I'm one of your hosts here at Wealthion, Andrew Brill. We took a look back at this year and hope you enjoy these favorite guest moments from one of our best interviews of 2024.
Let's move on now and look at Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine war has been going on for over 2 years now. It's hard to believe, but how do you think this situation is resolved?
Well, it's resolving faster than I expected. Ukraine is there are about 500,000 dead Ukrainian soldiers. So I hope Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and Victoria Nuland are happy with that, because they said they'd fight to the last Ukrainian, and they're doing a pretty good job. About 500,000 dead. Ukraine's military is in a complete state of collapse. If they're fighting, they're losing. Many of them are surrendering. There are mutinies. There are desertions. When they retreat, it's not an orderly fighting retreat to a defensive position. It's more like running for your life. And the Russians are annihilating them with drones and heavily armored helicopters, bombers, other weapon systems, minefields, etc. They're now sending 70-year-olds out. They're sending 17-year-olds out. When I say they, I mean the Ukrainians. They've instituted a draft. I haven't been there, but I get a lot of pretty good intelligence. They say the streets of Kharkov, Kiev, Lvov are empty because younger men, say between 17 and 30, are hiding or leaving the country or staying inside because they don't want to be dragooned off the streets and sent to the front lines. You say if you get to the front lines, your life expectancy is about 3 hours. That's how long it takes for the Russians to kill them. So they're getting beyond desperate. The wonder weapons have all failed. We sent them HIMARS, precision guided artillery, precision missiles. It took the Russians almost no time to figure out how to jam the GPS, so the missiles don't know where to go. They just go off course. We sent them Patriot anti-missile batteries, $1 billion a piece. I think we sent about 9. The only problem is that those anti-missile batteries cannot shoot down hypersonic missiles. The Russians have hypersonic missiles, so they've been blowing them up one at a time. There aren't many left. They got Challenger tanks from the UK, Leopard tanks from Germany, Abrams tanks from the US, and also Bradley fighting vehicles from the US. They've all been left burning on the battlefield, completely ineffective. The armor is ineffective. So one by one, the Storm Shadow missiles, most of them are shot down. They're pretty much out of them. They're out of 155 millimeter artillery shells because the Russian economy is making like 1 million a month. They're on a complete war footing. Western economies, the U.S. is struggling to open one factory that might make 30,000 a month, 300,000 a month, except it's not open. So they're still trying to do that. And our own supplies have been depleted. This is not just a question of Ukraine losing. It's a question of Western arsenals being stripped. All these weapons are defective anyway, meaning they're obsolete and don't work against Russian offensive capabilities. But even allowing for that, we don't have anything left. So everything, and the economic sanctions, I mean, I teach a course in financial warfare at the U.S. Army War College. I told my class, it was over 2 years ago, it was April 2022, right after the war began. I said the sanctions will fail. U.S. sanctions on Russia will fail, but it will be worse than that. Not only will they fail, but they'll boomerang and hurt the U.S. economy more than it hurts Russia. I just looked at the data. I don't have it all at my fingertips, but by every significant metric, unemployment, inflation, GDP growth, debt to GDP ratio, manufacturing PMIs, et cetera, the Russian economy is greatly outperforming the U.S. economy. And in particular, the one that caught my eye was debt to GDP ratio. Russia is 17%, practically debt-free. The U.S. is, we mentioned, about 125%, way past the point where the debt can create enough growth to even pay the debt. So nice job, Janet Yellen. Nice job, Wally Adeyemo, the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury. The sanctions have been a complete failure, but they keep upping the ante. The newest thing is to steal $300 billion of U.S. Treasury securities owned by Russia. That's a good way to sink the U.S. government securities market. It won't work. They might try to do it. They're going to try to do it at the reach consensus at the G7 summit meeting in Napoli, Italy, which is coming up on June 13th. So just about 2 weeks away. Not clear what they'll do. There's some talk of floating a $50 billion bond issue backed by the Russian assets. That's just a backdoor way of stealing them. It's a structured solution to stealing the assets. Some talk about just using the interest, not the principal. That's about it's earning those assets are earning about $3 billion a month. So it's been 2 years. So there's about $6 billion of interest piled up. It's just a smaller theft instead of a $300 billion theft. They're all part of why the world is trying to de-dollarize and get away from U.S. Treasury securities. Now, it does not mean if they do it, and they're trying to do it, and I expect they will in some form, it does not mean the U.S. Treasury market collapses the next day. I mean, you hear of hysterical claims like that. That's not going to happen. But at the margin, it diminishes confidence in U.S. Treasury securities. And if you felt that, and they do, you're a finance minister, head of a central bank in a country that's running a trade surplus, and you're getting dollars, and you have to decide what to do with the money. No different than your clients. How do you allocate your assets? Well, all of a sudden, U.S. Treasury securities don't look so good because the U.S. is in the business of stealing them. Do you like Japanese government bonds, German bonds, or Italian government notes any better? I don't think so. If you lose confidence in the U.S. Treasury securities market, why do those other vassal states look better when it comes to their government bond markets? So you pretty quickly end up buying gold. You don't have to be a gold bug. Just you as an asset allocator. If you can't trust the Western, I just mentioned the four biggest government bond markets in the world: Japan, Germany, Italy, and the U.S. If you can't trust them, and you want something liquid, you're not going to buy real estate, not with your reserve position. You're going to buy gold. And that's part of what's driving the price of gold higher. So again, despite 2 years of failure, the U.S. and NATO seem to want to double down with this stealing the Russian assets. And the other thing Putin will do, or two other things Putin will do. And by the way, the thing that policymakers don't understand about Putin, he doesn't bluff. He actually thinks hard about what he says, what he's going to say, gets a lot of advice. If he says something, you can put it in stone. He's going to do it. So he's already said, if the West steals these Russian assets, and as I mentioned, they're planning to do that maybe in as early as about 2 weeks, he's going to expropriate all the Western assets in Russia. And guess what? There are more Western assets in Russia than there are U.S. Treasury securities in the Russian reserve position, well over 300 billion. Massive oil infrastructure from BP and Shell, other oil companies. You can still buy a Coca-Cola in Moscow if you happen to be there. Take the Coca-Cola business. A lot of U.S. companies made a show, we're getting out of Russia at the start of the war, but they didn't really, and they might have changed some brands and closed some outlets, but there are still massive investments. So Putin will just take all that, give it to Rosneft or Gazprom or any of the other large Russian companies. But that's not the most dangerous thing he can do, which I expect he will. 200 billion out of the 300 billion of Russian-owned U.S. Treasury securities that they're planning to steal are in a place called Euroclear. Euroclear is the largest clearing, settlement, and custody institute in Europe, comparable to our DTCC, not quite as large, but quite large, with over $40 trillion of assets in custody. They have offices around the world. They're based in Belgium, but they have offices in Hong Kong, Dubai, rep office in Beijing, office in Singapore, etc. All Putin has to do, and Hong Kong's an interesting case because it's under the thumb of the Chinese communists, but it still kind of walks and talks like a rule of law jurisdiction. They have lawyers and courts and all that good stuff. All Russia has to do is sue Euroclear in Hong Kong for wrongful conversion of its assets, get a judgment in its favor, run around the world enforcing the judgment by putting a lien on other Euroclear assets that belong to other clients to settle the judgment. And you could throw a monkey wrench into the entire global monetary financial system. That this is the kind. So these, these idiots at the Treasury and the State Department and in NATO, they're playing with fire, and they don't even understand. I mean, what I just said was pretty clear. I happen to be a lawyer, so I understand this pretty well, but they haven't even thought about it.
It's an election year, and it looks like another Trump-Biden rematch at this time, but anything can change. And the RNC will be held in Milwaukee this year in July, and Trump is undergoing an onslaught of legal attacks. Do you think he survives these legal attacks, and will he become the next Republican nominee?
Well, he will certainly be the nominee. He's already got more than enough delegates to do that. And I expect he'll win the election also. It's pretty clear in the polls. He's leading in national polls, which he's never done before. I mean, even when he won in 2016, he did not lead in national polls. National polls are kind of irrelevant because we don't have national elections. We have state by state elections to elect electors to vote for the president. But if you boil that down to the 7 battleground states, he's leading in 7 out of 7. He's leading in the betting odds. He's, by every measure, Trump's ahead, and people say, well, polls can change. That's true. But right now, May, June is about when people lock in their choices. They're not very open to persuasion. So I do think it's a pretty good forecast of what's going to happen. So I would expect Trump to win. Having said that, he might not make it to Milwaukee because he might be in jail. We're, kind of awaiting the verdict in the Alvin Bragg farce. But I don't know what the verdict's going to be. I've done a lot of litigation. I work with some of the finest litigators in the world. They all tell me the same thing, which is that nobody knows what a jury's going to do. Like you can spend millions, and they do, in jury advice and jury selection research. And when they're interviewing potential jurors, they profile them and they do background, all in real time. I mean, it's quite a science. But having said that, every good litigator I've ever worked with, and I've worked with quite a few, says you just never know what a jury's going to do. So I'm not going to forecast the outcome of the case. If he's acquitted, that's a big victory. Even a hung jury is a very meaningful victory. If he's convicted, he might be in jail by July. So now, of course, the case will be appealed, will certainly be overturned on appeal, but that takes time. So, but just for viewers' benefit, there is no prohibition. There's no, you can be a convicted felon behind bars and still be elected president. There's no disqualification or prohibition on a prisoner being elected president of the United States. So I expect he will be, but it's just a question of how far the Democrats want to take this unconstitutional, farcical, lawfare campaign. But we'll find out.
Thanks again for watching these favorite moments of 2024, and we hope we can continue to provide you with information that'll help you invest wisely and be financially resilient. Wishing all of you a healthy, happy, safe, and prosperous 2025.